Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 197 of the podcast. This is going to be a little bit of a special episode because this is actually a replay of a live video conversation that I had with Allie Evans of Life.Church and Will Hutcherson, who kind of helped me host the video call. We held this live in the Ministry Boost Facebook group, and it was all about what Life.Church experienced as they had in-person services, which they've been having now for, 6 weeks or so. But when we had this conversation, it was their first week opening Life Kids Children's Ministry. So it was a great chance to learn from Allie. We had a previous conversation with Allie just to learn about what was it like having services in person for the first time without kids ministry. And so you could access that video at the same place where this was originally recorded, which is in the Ministry Boost Facebook group. If you just search Ministry Boost, and then it's got some other things mentioned after that, like children's ministry, Kidmin, youth-min, NextGen, executive pastors, lead pastors, that kind of thing. But you find that Ministry Boost Facebook group, ask to join. And the replay from this video interview is in there in the Facebook group. But if you want to listen to it on a podcast, as I prefer to do usually, because I can multitask and do other things, or if I'm driving, which I'm doing a little bit more of now than I used to. In fact, I'm listening to way less podcasts now than I used to because I don't have much time in the car, and that used to be the primary place where I would listen to podcasts. But you can listen to that conversation right here. However, you're probably going to want to jump in that group to check out some of the other resources and things like that, and links. We've got a link in there where we're sharing files from other churches about their communication plans or ideas and resources. There's also a link where you can upload any files that you want to share as it relates to COVID-19, online church, gathering in person again. We're just trying to share a lot of wisdom, information, and knowledge and ideas and all that stuff. So you can get links in that Facebook group. Just search for Ministry Boost. And we'll give you links to everything, including Allie talks about some free files that Life.Church has put together that they're sharing, that they use to launch their kids ministry again. You can get all those links, as usual, at nickblevins.com/episode 197. We'll have links to everything there. But here you go. I'm going to let you jump in and listen to this conversation that we had with Allie. It'll be a little longer than most podcast episodes because it was about an hour video call or close to it. So check this out. And I hope it's really helpful to you, whether your church has already started meeting again in person, and maybe you'll get some ideas there, or you haven't met yet in person, just like my church hasn't. And so this will give you some ways that you can think about and kind of get ahead and prepare for what's to come. So check this out. Well, we're back for a second conversation with Allie Evans of Life.Church. Allie, we talked a few weeks ago after you had like 3 services or 3 weekends or something like that. Mm-hmm. But you had no children's ministry during that time. So we got to learn what it was like, but nothing about children's ministry. And then this past weekend, you had children's ministry. So we're excited to hear about that. But I got to introduce Will Hutcherson. Our friend's going to kind of co-host this with me. Welcome, Will.
Hey, thank you. I'm excited about this conversation and to hear all that Allie has to share with us and her wisdom and experience.
That's right. We're going to take all her good ideas, learn from all their mistakes.
Yes.
Before we make our own. That's the key. So, Allie, I guess just give us like an overview of how it went this past weekend.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, yay. It's everything that you guys might be anticipating. It's so fun to be back in the building. I love church online. I think that we've all been doing, and some of you will continue to do for several months in some of your cases, great ministry online for families. But man, there's something so cool about being back in real life. And so that's what we got to experience. Couple of things. One of the kind of fears as we all talk about reopening kids ministry, and we talked about this last time, I think, just real briefly, but we think, oh my gosh, what will that look like if I'm returning with all of the kids that I had the week before we went into quarantine? Like whether that was 100 or 1,000 in your church's case, you're thinking, oh, how could we do it with all 100 of those kids? Well, if you're like me, you won't have to worry about that. And it's funny that I'm laughing. I should be crying that that's the case. But the truth is people are being very careful about returning to anything, about returning to church, about returning to their offices, about, returning their kids to daycare, all of those things. People are being equally as cautious about returning to church. And we saw that when we opened up our doors just for adults, like I shared with you last time. And we saw the exact same thing as we opened up our doors for kids ministry. On one hand, I'm very thankful. I'm thankful that, one, I believe that one of the ways that we communicated with parents ahead of the weekend that we opened, June 6th and 7th, was we asked them in all of our communication, please, if anyone in your family has any kind of illness, there's runny nose, coughing, any of those things, please just stay home and feel good about attending church online for another week. That's probably the best way in that case for your family to attend church. And we believe people did that. So those people who might have felt like maybe someone might have a cold or have something creeping on, or even just allergies that causes a runny nose, they kept their kids at home, which was fantastic. There's another portion of people that just stayed home because they're just not quite ready, which we appreciate. But also the reality is we're in June. I don't know where you may live and what that looks like for your communities, but for us, a lot of people are on vacation. And they love the idea that they can still attend church online while they're at the lake, or they're out finally visiting grandma, or, whatever that looks like for them. And so all of those things were the case. So this time last year, this particular week last year, now remember we have lots of locations. We had 12,000 children this week last year. This year, we had 4,000. So if that gives you an idea of the percentage of kids that returned, let that be helpful to you and encourage you that you won't have to probably, if you're like me, you may open your doors and 80% of the kids rush back in the door. And in that case, I'm going to be very little helpful, or a very little help to you. But it's been real congruent to what we've seen the last few weeks. Also, a piece of encouragement is some people have asked about, what about your leaders? If you don't have enough leaders that are coming back, how in the world can you open up your kids' spaces and those kinds of things? As God would have it, the number of leaders who were ready and felt safe coming back, and who were in town and not on vacation, all of those things, it was congruent. So we had enough leaders to cover the number of kids that we had in every case, every service, every campus. There might have been, like any old weekend, where you've got to pull in an additional staff person from your hosting, like, hey, can you come jump in and lead a small group in elementary at the 10 o'clock? There was some of that kind of normal, help me fill in the gaps kind of thing. But
volunteer woes,
just all the normal volunteer woes don't go away, you guys. But so that was such great news for us that, as God would have it, it all just sort of leveled out. Another concern that I've heard from some folks is, how are you doing your check-in? And in our case, we are doing temperature checks in our states where we've opened so far, of every kid who walks in the door and every leader who comes in the door. So there's this thought that, oh my goodness, there's going to be this big line and people are going to be backed up. It didn't happen. Even at our larger services that have the highest number of children, as people sort of trickle in, and anticipated that, because again, in our parent communication, we shared, allow yourself a little extra time because we will be doing temperature checks to keep your family safe. People did. And so the trickle of people coming in for the 4 o'clock service, the 10 o'clock service, didn't create any sort of backup or lines, even though we were doing a more extensive check-in process. So some of those early concerns we had were kind of taken care of.
Yeah, I want to ask about the extensive check-in process, but also just to get a better handle on the numbers real quick. I mean, you said last year at the same time you had 12,000 kids. So Life.Church Children's Ministry is basically like a giga church by itself, which is just crazy. And I know it's spread out over whatever it is, campuses, however many, 30, 40 campuses. But adult attendance started really low. Like I remember doing the math the first time you told me what that first week was like. Mm-hmm. And you're like, we only had a third of the seats available and half those RSVP'd and half those. And like by the time you got down to it, I was like, okay, so did you get like 10% of your capacity? Like I wasn't sure. But that has grown. So what was adult attendance like this week? And I know it's grown to that point.
Yeah, so that's a fun thing too, is when we're able to do church this way, you guys, we're learning the thing that all of us in NextGen Ministry have told our leadership for years and years, that growing by families grows your church. Family ministry is important to the growth and the health of our church. And
Amen.
So it was so
Preach.
great. Yeah, it's so great to see those hard numbers. But so our total attendance this weekend grew by 50%. So
wow.
That's fun, right? So last week we were a church of 20,000. This week we were a church of 30,000. So it's like, woohoo,
Yeah. And I think you said somewhere when we were texting or something that adult attendance was probably a little over half of what it was last year. If you were comparing, was it something like that? Am I getting that right? So kids was about a third, because you said 4,000 out of 12,000. I'm doing math on the fly. Let's hope I'm right. And then, but was adult attendance like close to 60% or something of last year? It's a little higher, I guess, is what I remember than the kids.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, a little,
which is probably to be expected because you've had some weeks with adult services, and that's good.
Allie, I want to go back to the whole check-in process, because I think one of the things I remember from the first conversation we had a couple of weeks ago is you talked about how when you first opened up, everyone was kind of like just very careful, and even the staff, like you lost a sense of warmth and welcome, that you really enjoy in your environment. What have you done since then within the environments to make it more welcoming, and specifically for kids ministry with that more intensive check-in process? I imagine maybe the volunteers are wearing masks. Like, what have you done to maybe help warm up the culture in light of all of this extra stuff?
That's a great question. And for anybody who might have missed that call last time, when we opened our adult services, we'd taken everything out of the lobby spaces. Everyone had on masks, and we had our music turned down so that we could hear better, because it's harder to hear when you have mask on and all those things. And the environment felt really sterile week one. So we were like, okay, we can't do that. This is still a great fun place to worship Jesus, So we made some of those changes, turned the music up. But here's what we did in kids ministry. Also, I sent you guys, and I think Nick is going to post it somewhere, or you guys are going to post it somewhere, but I sent some sign templates. We have the kind of the circle signs that say, so glad you're here, welcome back to Life, kids, those kinds of things. So as families were walking up to the door, they were greeted by, we were very selective in our student leaders that we chose to be outside greeting families, and our adult leaders that we chose. So, the person I think of, Riley Savala. Riley Savala is one of our associate youth pastors at the campus where I happen to volunteer. And Riley has more energy than should be like humanly capable in her tiny little body. So I was like, you've got to have her at the door of Life Kids, because she's just out there jumping and, oh my gosh, it's so great to see you guys. So she's, screaming at every family coming up. And then we had great student leaders out front that have lots of energy. They're out there dancing and, just having a ball. We had music outside. And then we also rented those. Have you guys ever seen those really cool signs you can rent that are huge letters on sticks? And it was like, welcome back, Life Kids. I mean, every city that we're in, I think, has one of these companies, but usually it's a print shop and you rent them. We also did like balloon arches and some of those kinds of things that don't require any touching, but visually say, we're glad you're back, kind of a thing. Now, we chose to go optional with mask in Oklahoma because we're allowed to. Based on what our governor and our local authorities have said, we're able to go optional. So we didn't have on masks this week unless a leader chose to. And as it happened, all of the people who served in our lobby spaces doing temp checks and those kinds of things, those folks chose not to wear a mask. We didn't get any negative feedback on that, by the way. Not to suggest that someone at another church might not get negative feedback. So do what works for your community requirements. But I think that helped a little bit to not have on mask. And so the check-in process is families would walk into the door. They would be greeted by these crazy, student leaders outside. And we're glad you're here. Pretty quickly when they walked in, without feeling like they were being jumped on, we'd say, hey, good to see you guys. We're doing temp checks this afternoon or this morning. Come this way. And we'd kind of move them out of that immediate traffic flow, pull them over to the side a couple of steps. And we have those guns that you hold that close to your forehead. So there's no touch. And we would take their temperature. It takes literally 1 second. And, it was super fast. I did guest services for 3 services. So out of all the families that I did temp checks on, one little girl was like, "What are you doing?" And so I said, "Oh, look." So I did it to my hand, and then she held out her hand. I did it to her hand. And then she was like, cool with me doing it to her forehead. But of all the people, I had that one. Out of the 4,200 children that we checked in this weekend across all of our locations that were open, we didn't have one child that was over 100.4. So we did have a plan in place, and we still do for the next few weeks, as long as we do temp checks. If a child has a temperature over 100.4, do you guys want me to go into what we're going to do? Should I? It's
Yes.
Sure. I think it's great. Please.
So really brief, and again, don't know how it works because we didn't have to deploy this particular thing. But so if a family checks in and one of the kids is over 100.4, what we would do is we had a backup person, so a staff person, kind of in the wing there, just off to the side, and we'd go, "Hey, Kyle, Bethany's family." Bethany would be the child who has the fever. So specifically using Bethany's name, "Bethany's family needs to finish their check-in process. Can you help them?" So then that family would have gone to Kyle. Kyle would have had the cue. It's Bethany with the fever. Because we don't want to embarrass anyone, people, it is kind of awkward when you're the family that's like walking out the door, and so then Kyle would then be prepared to say, "Hey guys, it looks like Bethany has a slight temperature this morning. I know you don't want her to be here if she's not feeling well. And here's a bag. We want to make sure that you guys get to church online today. And in here are some stickers." And I forget what all they put in their bag, but fun little doodahs for everyone in the family. So there's plenty. And we don't count them out and go, "Here's 5 stickers because you have 5 kids. But we just kind of load the bag down with goodies and then ask them to hit church online this weekend. We'll see you again next weekend. And then we definitely that day follow up with the family with a phone call from the staff member and say, "Hey, just checking in. We really missed having you guys with us. How's Bethany doing? How's she feeling?" And so we have that process in place. Again, I don't know how it's going to work because we didn't have to use it. But so that then they check in. If everybody's clear like they were this weekend, then we kind of do this. Come over to the check-in computer, and there's a leader there who's touching the screen for them. The parent, if they read their email or saw the Facebook group or, saw our social media channels or anything, they knew that they would have a mostly touch-free check-in process. And so the leader checks in the family, and then we just encouraged, but didn't police, that one parent would walk the kids to their rooms just to eliminate any clog there might be in the hallways. But honestly, we probably wouldn't have had any clogs had parents not done that. So they go to the room. Once they get to the room, birth through kindergarten, we have a sign in, kind of a thing. And the leader was equipped and ready to sign in the family as opposed to the parent having to touch a pen, touch a clipboard, and all those kinds of things. So then the child would go in. So that was the check-in process. Check-out process was like pretty much like it always is. Again, didn't have to worry too much about having X's taped on the floor 6 feet apart for checkout line because A, numbers were, again, pretty low, but B, people at this point are pretty conditioned to space themselves out. So it just sort of happened naturally that we didn't have people stacked on top of each other and did the checkout process. Typically, what we've done in our environment is we take the child's tag off and throw it in the garbage or hand it to the parent. There's some exchange or whatever. It's very informal. But we just made sure to not do any exchanges, just so that it was, again, a touch-free checkout process as well.
Oh, wow. So you're not taking the sticker off.
We don't take it off. Because a lot of kids like to leave their tags on anyway, because they like to go to lunch with their tag on, or whatever. And restaurants here are open, and it's a great way for the family to invite people to Life.Church when a kid has a Life.Church sticker on. So,
yeah. All right. So one of the interesting things, I think with you, Allie, is you have all these locations in different cultures and environments. So some of your locations, like for Oklahoma, for instance, you don't have to wear masks. Have you seen a lot of differences in how you've had to approach maybe more, areas that have higher, like hotspots per se? Like, what are some of those differences that you've seen? And what would you say for the people who are watching that maybe are in an environment that
sorry.
You're good. An environment that has a little bit more of a hot spot, like for instance, South Florida, right? We're kind of known as being a hot spot. What would you say to individuals who are in those environments?
Well, here's kind of our direction is what makes sense in your community. If your community is open enough that restaurants are open, but all of the staff are wearing masks still, those kinds of things, then do what's commiserate with the rest of your neighborhood, your community. Don't be the guy not wearing a mask when everybody else in town is wearing a mask, but also if no one's worn a mask and it's appropriate related to your governmental authorities to not wear a mask, and no one's been wearing a mask for 6 weeks, it would be kind of weird. There's no reason to hang on to that unless people optionally want to hang on to mask, because a year from now, if someone optionally wants to walk into church with a mask on, do it. You do what you've got to do to feel comfortable to be here at church. But we're not going to require those things. So we're just saying, do what makes sense. We want to make it easy for people to come to church. And we also want people to feel safe when they come to church. So it's just kind of a balancing act, but more than anything, what is your government saying? And then what is your community saying?
I love that. That is such a great point. Because it's easy for us to listen to what someone's doing somewhere else, but to hear your heart of hey, what's your neighborhood doing? What's your community doing? Do what's appropriate. I love that heart. And I think that's the right way to approach. It's great.
For sure. Allie, I want to ask, so you put a bunch of these systems and processes in place and you've shared some files. You mentioned the sign one. Is that one of the ones that's also available on Open? We can pop a link in here to Open resources, which is pretty much everything Life.Church gives away. So if somebody goes in there, they probably need to search Life Kids Reopen or something like that.
Yeah. So if you go to open.life.church and in the search bar, you can search reopening kids or kids reopen or any combination like that. And it'll pull up one of the first little boxes it'll pull up is, I think ours says Life Kids Reopening. And so any of those resources should be in there. We just have those, it's signs that many of you guys have seen your social media posts used for photo ops at Easter and those kinds of things. And they're the round PVC kind of material that you can get printed real quick and cheaply at your local print shop. That just say things like, there's a smile behind this mask, or welcome back to Life Kids, or, those kinds of things. It just kind of adds either a way to be funny with people as they're walking in, or just kind of an extra little, hey, I can't high five you right now or fist bump you, but hey, glad you're here.
Yeah. And I think Will referenced this too, but your week one, you described when it was just adults and everything, it was just kind of not the feel you wanted. A funeral is probably a harsh way to say it, but that was the feel. And so you have been intentional about creating that environment, which I think is really important, especially with kids too, because they're going to come in. I think about my kids. We had our friends came over. She's our elementary director. Her and her husband came by and they surprised our kids with a gift. And so we're out there. It's later one night and we have 3 kids. Our middle child is 4 years old. She'll be 5 here in just a few months. And she was kind of excited to see everybody, but then we're all talking and we're having multiple conversations at once. And she goes, I'm a little nervous. There's a crowd. It's 2 people. There's 2 people other than my family. You know what I mean? So she's like, I'm a little nervous. There's a crowd. She just kept saying, it's a crowd. It's this is not a crowd, Kenzie. This is 2 people. But I think about her when we gather again, that anxiety, nervousness, whatever you call it, things like that. We got to be really intentional about kind of creating the environment that'll lower that guard, So that's really good. That's really good. Somebody asked a question about special needs. What did that look like?
Yeah. So we just ran our normal process in our relationship. We really lead our kids with special needs through one-on-one relationship. And those things just kind of picked up where they left off. We didn't, I honestly think that some of those families were a little more hesitant, at least at the campus where I serve, were a little more hesitant to return. They may be waiting to hear from their friends who came back. What's happening in Life Kids? How did it feel? Because some kids are a little, gosh, my daughter's blowing me up, you guys. I'm sorry. But it's just a little bit more anxious at times. And so anyway, all that to say, we didn't really have any negative feedback about how our normal process works in this new sort of normal.
Yeah. Somebody else asked a question about ratios. Did you manage like room specific type ratios, or did it just work out because it was a third of your normal attendance or whatever? How did that work?
That is a great question. And that's been one of the big questions. We thought about doing that weeks ago before we opened the adult services, and we started doing RSVPs because we thought, man, we're going to have to manage this. If everybody shows up, then we realized, we're not going to need to manage this. People are taking their time coming back. Again, same thing was true with families. And so we thought, we'll learn from week one. Best case scenario, we're overrun with children, and we've got to figure something out within the next 6 days of how to do this better next Saturday. But the truth is, it just worked out. Now, along with that question, I typically am getting, how did you social distance kids? Honestly, we didn't. So, if I served in our 4, 5, and 6-year-old room, which was so fun. And at one of the services, and I think we had 12 kids, which at that particular service, we would normally have more like 27, and the kids sat next to each other. We probably could have tried to force them, but we would have spent so much time just going, Billy, get away. Billy, scoot over, arm's length, and it's just like at this point, we're able to meet, so we didn't even try.
Yeah, that was the next question that was asked, by the way. So you were thinking the right thing.
Yes. Yeah. It would just be impossible. Now, someone asked what about like your elementary room where you have 70 kids on a normal 10 o'clock service? Well, we had 20. So it's easy to, during large group time when, everybody's sitting on the floor or whatever, that room is huge. So those kids, we were just like, okay, spread out. You guys can have all the room you want, but we weren't enforcing. And then when it was time for small group, they all huddled up together anyway. Now we were pretty over the top about hand sanitizer. If I even looked at a kid doing this to his nose, I was like, all right, buddy, let's hand sanitize, which you can manage when you've only got 7, 8, 10, 12 kids. You got to kind of eyes on everybody. So we were, over the top with hand sanitizer, over the top with cleaning the table. The kid that did this, after I hand sanitized, I also wiped everything off that was in front of him at his table and, that kind of thing. But it wasn't a hindrance. I didn't feel like I was the cleaning police,
That's good. One of the questions, I have 2 questions, but the first one I want to ask, it goes back to volunteers. And was there anything special or unique you did in leading up to kind of opening? Were there special training, events or Zooms that you had, videos? Like, what was your kind of getting ready process for your volunteers?
That's a great question. And we kind of went back and forth. You can go super elaborate. You could have we're all going to get together in the parking lot in person, and we're going to walk through this, or we're going to meet together in one of our large spaces and bring every leader. And we thought, man, no, we're not going to do that. So for us, what made more sense to us was what's really changing. Like, honestly, each individual area of ministry. So there's guest services. There were some significant changes there. We're doing temp checks and no one's going to touch the computer but you. So that took about 2 minutes. So each Life Kids pastor from their location shot a video for their guest services team and said, hey guys, here's a couple things that are going to be a little bit different. Literally took 2 minutes. Great video, super short. Otherwise, everything is the same. We want every kid to feel welcome. We want every family to want to invite friends next week. And then there was a video that each kids pastor shot for our birth through 24-month, kind of the baby rooms. Here's a few differences. We're going to ask families to hang on to their own diaper bags. We're going to leave car seats out in the hall. We're going to ask that we not do any, there was a few tweaks to that environment. But again, 2-minute video for the Life Kids pastor to explain. Then our 2-year-olds through kindergarten, the way those rooms run is all very similar. And the kinds of supplies they have in the rooms and their routines are the same. So we shot one video, or the kids pastor would shoot one video, 2 minutes. And like the big difference in those spaces was we have toys that we play with pre-service. And so you're going to have all your normal toy playing time. And then when it's time for curriculum to start, when you put things back in the bin and you would normally put them on the cart inside the room, you're going to put those bins outside the room, and fairies are going to come and clean those for you. They didn't need to know who was cleaning them or why they were cleaning them or what solution they were cleaning them with, because it didn't involve them. They just needed to know someone is going to clean them really, really well with an appropriate solution. And so we didn't bog down their 2-minute video with all the details of other things. And so then our elementary rooms got a similar video. So there were 4 little videos that the kids pastor shot, 2 minutes or less. And that was our training. And without a hitch, it went great. That's
great. I love that.
And then fairies who cleaned the toys, they got trained whenever they got there.
Right. Yeah. Hey, here's some wings. Put these on. We want you to walk the hallways with this spray bottle and cloth, right?
Just sprinkle glitter on the toys. They're clean.
Oh my gosh. That's great. I kind of like that idea. I might make my cleaning people wear fairy wings.
Yes.
So that's great. So the next question is really about move up. So summer is typically a time where most NextGen ministries, we're moving people up. We're doing a move up process for, preschool into elementary into middle school and middle school into high school. How are you handling move up? I know some churches do move up in June. Some are planning for August. Where are you guys at with move up?
Man, that is a great question. And I would say that was our biggest learning this weekend. You're always getting, no matter how well you prepare, there's going to be something that you missed. We made a decision. Now, historically at Life.Church, what we do is the first weekend of June, which is typically the lowest attended weekend of the year at the majority of our campuses. Years ago, we decided we would do something called summer kickoff. And that would be the weekend that we do inflatables outside and food trucks and all kinds of fun stuff between services and all that. And then that was also the same weekend that kids would move up to their next room. And so now I'm a first grader, I get to move to the elementary space or what have you. And obviously that didn't happen. And so we, like so many of you guys, are small group focused ministry. So we thought in our mind, and not every, particularly in the early years of kids ministry, our leaders don't necessarily move up very well with their kids. They want to stay with 3-year-olds, or whatever. So we thought, well, what we don't want to do is bring kids back after 3 months into this new environment without their leader. We believed, based on some anecdotal things that we had heard from some parents, little Susie is going to want to be back with Miss Stephanie, her leader that she's had for the last year. So we'll do that through the summer. You'll stay with your former group, and then we'll move you up during back to school, which is what a lot of churches do, is move up during back to school. But we've always done it in June. So this weekend, we learned that a lot of kids, as much as they probably loved Miss Stephanie, were so ready to move up to Connect or to Loop, which is our 2 elementary environments. And so I even had a conversation with a little girl. She looked at her name tag and it said Crosstown, which is for kindergartners. And she was like, why? This looks like my old room, And I was like, and her mom was like, she's moving to Connect, right? I went, yeah, go ahead, make that happen, And we just kind of on the fly made some exceptions. Like, we did probably not. And so there were more of those kinds of conversations, that way more than parents who were like, oh, thank goodness she gets to go hang out with Miss Stephanie for the rest of the summer or whatever. So here's what we've decided to do. We're typically pretty much toe the line on, you need to be in the room that's appropriate for your age or grade. Like, we're pretty hardcore on that. So this summer, we're going to kind of lift that hardcoreness and just go, whatever makes most sense. If he wants to go back with Dan and be with Mr. Dan in Crosstown, then we're going to let him hang out with Dan in Crosstown this summer, and he can move up to Connect later. And so technology wise, though, in our system, we're going to go ahead and move him up. We do need to go ahead and make that change, but just relationally, we want him to be where he's comfortable. And so we learned that this weekend, and the great news is, you guys, we can all pivot really, really quickly. I think sometimes we think, I need months to prepare for something like that. We don't. Now we'll do our big make the move party, or maybe fall kickoff will be what it's called, during back to school time, where we do the big shebang, invite all your friends. Hopefully we can do things like inflatables and food trucks at some point in the fall. and we'll do a big celebration. But as far as, man, I feel like a first grader, or I'm a fourth grader, I'm ready to move up, we're going to allow that to happen starting this weekend.
That's great. I love that. And that is, I think, such a good explanation of just where we are right now. It's as leaders, we want to have a plan, and we love to just execute our great plans. But we are in a place where it is, what do you want to do? That's kind of our culture right now.
Yep. Fun and flexible. That's been our motto. We're going to be fun and flexible, guys.
Hey, Scott asked, did you remove chairs from the elementary space? Do you use chairs from your elementary space normally? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we don't use chairs in elementary space and haven't for years. So
nothing changed. Yeah.
Nothing changed.
Yeah. How about, Tyler asked this, I was thinking about this earlier. You mentioned that you ended up having enough volunteers to make it work. You had about a third of the kids you had last year. Do you know what percentage of volunteers you did get come back? I've seen a lot of people post in some ministry Facebook groups saying I'm getting half of my volunteers. What did you all see?
Yes, so that's great. And we're in there. Some of our campuses got back about 50%. Some got back about 75%. So we're somewhere in that range, just depending on a particular location.
Did you, because here's the other thing, our team's been talking about this too. There's a couple things that are going on with getting volunteers back. Some of it is, of course, COVID, and I don't want to come back right away. I don't feel safe, or there's some reason that I'm probably not coming back until there's a vaccine. That's one category. But there's also a category of volunteers that's a sort of a concern, but really it's just I've been out of it for a while, and I kind of like not doing this or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. We got used to church online, or we're going to kind of do that for a while. Like there's other versions of that reason that they don't come back. Did you ask? Was there a survey? I mean, how did that work when you were figuring out who's coming and who's not?
Well, here's what we did. We did send a survey by campus to the leader team, but the language that we used assumed you wanted to come back. So we didn't really let anyone off the hook, not because we want to trap anyone, but we believe in the calling that you've said God's placed on your life. And so I think the options for most of the surveys that the pastors sent out were things like, can't wait to see you next weekend. And if you clicked that box, then the kids team would contact you and go, okay, so someone asked too in the questions, how many services did we have for kids? It's important to note that at every one of our locations, except 2 so far, we cut 4 or 5 service times. So at campuses that had 9 services, they may be only running 4 or 5 now. So we've cut a lot of services. So yes, if you're a campus that is now ready to open Life Kids, you're having Life Kids at every service time. But there's less service times globally, all over the whole building. But anyway, so the first option was, can't wait to see you this weekend. Second option was, I'm not quite ready. So then those people got a call, and it was like, hey, so tell me what's going on. Well, hey, we're going to the lake this weekend. It just so happens our vacation was this weekend, or, we're not quite sure. So then we could get kind of the explanation. And then the last option was, I still have some questions. Can you give me a call? So then those folks, it was a different, so everyone got a call, but at least we knew what we were asking and what we were looking for. And so here's the truth, Nick. At the end of the day, one of the things that we need to realize as the capital C Church is we are church planters. Life.Church, for instance, and some of your churches, we've been around for almost 25 years. Some of you guys have been around for 75 years, 50 years. Our churches are established. Well, we need to all wipe the slate clean and pretend like we're starting over. We get the blessing and the opportunity to be church planters right now. And our team is so excited about that idea. There are things that happen over time in your church culture that you think, how did this ever start? Like, how did we ever get on this thing where people could serve once a month? Like, where did that come from? Because in our culture, now I know that may work in some of your environments. In our environment, if that where we were, this would be a great time to change that. It's like, you know what? That actually isn't a thing. And we need our small group leaders to serve every week because that's what matters, So I think there are some things in this church planting, kind of mentality, or we're rebuilding the church. If there are things that you've wished that you could have, I wish I could be more relationally connected with all of my leaders through a great coaching team. But man, it's just, there's too many people and I just don't have it. Or there's too many services, or there's just not enough time, or there's not enough people. Now's a great time to rethink all of that. So any of the things where you find yourself mentally going, oh man, I wish, really take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Because I believe that God is calling us to rebuild his church. He's not surprised by the fact that only 20% of our people or 30% of our people are returning to the building. And Nick, you're right. Some people are choosing church online, not because they're scared of COVID or that they're hesitant. It's because church online is great. We've all done a great job of executing, delivering messages and even trying to do some connection points. But I think that a lot of us believe if we're close to a church physically, there's nothing like IRL. In real life connection is what we all need as the body of Christ. And so I just want to encourage, I know I'm getting on a soapbox is not what you intended for me to do, but man, anything that it's time to rethink, now is the time. Any of those negative thoughts that you might have or any hesitancies, man, use this. I was talking yesterday to someone, I was like, all right, I was talking to some of my team, if I were a small business owner and I was opening up a nail salon right now, I don't know why I say that, but it's a nail salon. What would I do? What would I be willing to do? And that's how I earn my living. That's how I put groceries on the table. That's how I pay my mortgage. What would I be willing to do to get people to come to my nail salon? Like, what is my list? I'm whiteboarding, right? Like, what are all the ways? I'm on social media. I'm doing personal invitations. I've printed up some things. I'm putting flyers on windshield wipers. I mean, I'm doing the thing. So I kind of feel that way about this. Like, we need to have an owner's mentality of our ministry. And I'm not at all suggesting that you guys don't always have that. But I'll admit, for me, being in ministry for 19 years, I've had seasons of complacency. And so when, getting up in the morning and thinking, I'm rebuilding, I have an opportunity to rebuild the church. What am I doing personally to invite people? How am I engaging people in serving opportunities? How am I intersecting with people when I am at Walmart or Lowe's, or, I'm on a Zoom call with my HOA, or I meet, I'm walking through the neighborhood and I cross paths with some neighbors I've never met before. What am I doing to rebuild the church? Because as we talk about student ministry or kids ministry starting back up, those things are great, but we've got to help people get back, So it's not just about opening our doors. Week one, what we've told all of our whole team, the win is opening the doors. Week one, that's the win. Open the doors, help people feel safe, and in the hour that they're with us, let's create an environment that encourages them to invite their friends to come back next week. So that was our mission for week one. But from now going forward, we've got to figure out, how do we rebuild the church? And kids ministry is one way to do that. And we need to each individually be owners of our ministry. How are we proactively, if this were my small business, if this were just my church, I'm the lead pastor, what am I personally willing to do to get people in the doors? So anyway. Totally separate from anything.
It's a good word. I like the Allie soapbox rants. It's very true. And our pastor, probably a month ago now, he had heard another pastor talk about some things that he thought were really helpful. And he asked our staff to wrestle with those questions. And then we discussed it. And a couple of the questions were like, what was lost during COVID that needs to stay lost?
Yeah.
And what was found that needs to stay found? Yeah. I think it's really important. And so, and I've heard friends that we know, have mutual friends that have like realigned their staff because, in their mind, things have changed significantly. Even when they gather in person again, online needs to take such a bigger piece, of what's going on. And they've realigned staff, in even big ways to leverage that. So those are the kinds of things we need to think about, not just like the reactionary, how do we get back to what it used to be, which that's what we thought.
Yeah. And I love the online mention because, my prayer is that none of us dial back what we're doing online. If our folks are giving us the feedback that the online experience has been amazing, let's keep making it amazing. I don't want to be fearful that people will never come back to an, in real life service or opportunity to engage their faith. But if they can't, I want them to have an amazing experience online. So yeah, I love it that you mentioned that.
Let me ask you, this is a total curveball you may not even know, okay? And this isn't exactly related to gathering again. But I know at our church and a lot of leaders I talked to, when it came to like measuring engagement online with like the main services out, the first 4 to 8 weeks or whatever, it seemed like a lot of churches were going up and it was growing. And I feel like we saw that too. We did student ministry groups online, and that actually was pretty good. And we started above 3/4 of our normal attendance there, which is great.
That's awesome.
And then kids ministry probably never started great. And boy, it really declined. I mean, really declined. It like fell like that.
Yeah.
That was the official measure, measure. Actually, it was probably in 2 hops. Like after Easter, it really dropped. And then sometime like getting close to the end of May, again, after Memorial Day, it dropped again. And I was just wondering, did you all measure that throughout? And did you see decline, stay the same, increase? What did that look like at Life.Church?
In kids ministry specifically, or across all those areas?
Kids ministry specifically, I'm thinking. But I'd hear all of them. I'll take it all.
Yeah. So kids ministry specifically, same exact thing. And we've talked about this, and we maybe have even talked about this on one of these larger calls, but parents are exhausted from, okay, all right, I know you want to get on your small groups Zoom call, let's do that. I think where it's easy for families to engage online. So I've heard from some churches that their kids ministry was only available at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. They saw a huge decline because it just was stopped being priority. But if your content is available all week long at any point, where a kid could jump on at any point, that the long-term engagement is better because there's more opportunity for a kid to go watch that content and for the parent to engage in the parent piece. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that some of that stuff just didn't stick as well as we had hoped.
Yeah, and that's one concern I have about, hey, we're just going to watch online.
Yeah.
I don't hear that and think, and we're going to lead our kids online. You know what I mean? Like I don't hear that in there. Same with students, things like that. So that's one concern I definitely had. One person asked, by the way, about Life.Church videos. Are they going to stay the full Life.Church kids videos? Will they continue online?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for Life Kids, we moved from kind of just posting what our content was online to making it what we call church at home. And it had kind of little banners on the side so that families could differentiate. And yes, we'll continue to do church at home, which is definitely more designed for the kids being at home. And, now if you use Life.Church, Life Kids content at your church in your physical location, it'll still look like what you've always had in your physical locations. Will, you started?
One of the things, so I love that. And I love what you said of like, Nick, you kind of said the phrase, what have we found that we don't want to lose? And Ali, I know you've said this of like, let's hope we don't lose this digital engagement that we've all gained. Now the scariness is gone. You know how to relatively do it now. So let's continue. And I love that Life.Church is committed to continuing to do a church at home. I would encourage anyone listening the best they can to restructure in a way so that even after you go back in physical meeting, that there's some type of digital presentation you're giving weekly to engage your community. I love that. One of the things we've not done, though, is we've really not talked about student ministry yet. And it's such a hard, I don't even know what question to ask you, honestly, other than what the heck do we do, right? Like maybe we just start there. Like, what does student ministry look like? Because here's what I know. And yes, kids ministry digital engagement dropped, but student ministry digital engagement almost barely ever took off, right? I mean, it's like we across the board, we saw a little bit of engagement, but then more and more as I talk to youth pastors, especially after Easter, their Zoom groups declined, their overall views on their student ministry offerings really declined. And now it just seems that there's this, as we've talked about, this Zoom exhaustion and this digital content exhaustion. So what does student ministry look like maybe going forward for Life.Church?
That is a really good question. So a few things. One is we are not going to dial back what we're doing in the digital space. So part of what we do is our messaging that lands and lives on YouTube. So during quarantine, every Thursday night, we moved from Wednesday night to Thursday night, we would do our normal student ministry message. And it would get posted on Thursday, and then it just lives there after that. And it was in the form of a YouTube premiere, because in YouTube premieres, if you haven't used that function, you can chat and those kinds of things. We do that instead of the church online platform because kids are already on YouTube. our students are already on YouTube. So it's a familiar space. We didn't want to give them another place to go. So YouTube Premiere was a great place for us to do our message, our standard sort of message. But what we did was we really ramped up and experimented with a lot of stuff. If any of you guys have read the book, Great by Choice, by Jim Collins, he's the same guy that wrote Good to Great and some of those other books. I can't remember.
The Mighty Fall.
Yes, The Mighty Fall. Part of it's a great book. I highly recommend it. But one of the things he talks about is fire bullets and then cannonballs, right? So what you want to do is, where you can, experiment with stuff. The great news about social media is it's easy to experiment with things. If you have a couple of high-level leader, smart, wise students that are in kind of your leadership piece that understand how to utilize social media, and I don't mean just how to get on there and post things, but really utilize and maximize social media, and maybe a couple of other leaders who you can kind of put in charge of that. You don't even have to be a part of that. They can experiment with all kinds of stuff in your social media space, because at the end of the day, although there is content exhaustion, kids are still on TikTok all day long, every single day while they've been in quarantine. And now that it's summer, they're still scrolling through Instagram all day long, intermittently, they're still on YouTube. So those spaces aren't irrelevant, but trying to make them get to a space at 8 p.m. on Tuesday is really challenging. So what can we do in those social media spaces where kids live that will engage their, not just teach them something, but help them take steps in their faith? So a little bit of both. What's some fun stuff that keeps them connected to your page? What is some relational stuff? We've done a lot of student-to-student interviews and conversations that, and done them in a live way, live, and students love watching those. That's actually gotten a high return, and asking students to take next steps and then post about those. Those kinds of things have actually, it's kind of low programmatic. So we're not doing high quality video with those things. It's super relevant to how social media posts typically look like that. And it's been effective. So we're going to continue to fire bullets, in those spaces. As far as coming back to physical locations in Oklahoma, our students have always met on Wednesday nights. So it's separate from the weekend. So we've allowed students to come back and serve. Those students who served are allowed to come back and serve beginning week 1 of the adult experience opening with parent permission. Those first couple of weeks, we're like, we want to make sure your parent knows you're coming up to the church, because it was still early in phase 3 for us here. So now students are serving like crazy. We had students serving in Life Kids this weekend. They follow all the same protocols. We're doing temp checks on them just like we do adults and all those kinds of things. So our student kids, our student Swerve kids are serving. We call them Swerve. And then we'll meet again on Wednesday nights beginning in July. Youth pastors are able to kind of pick a few Wednesday nights when they want to have some small group nights. So we're not doing big programming because I don't know if we have great programming online. You can go listen to messages and those kinds of things online at any point during the week. When you come together, we want you to come together and be in your small group. And so we are going to do those kinds of things at our locations. The campus where I serve has chosen July 1st, 15th, and 29th, I think. So every other Wednesday through July. And my students, for one, the girls that I meet with, are so pumped they can't see straight. I mean, like, they cannot wait, And then we'll meet again officially, which will start back up every week beginning August 19th, as far as we know. Unless something else happens. So we will not do temp checks in July at that point. We don't think that that'll be necessary. And again, unless something changes, unless our governor pulls us back into phase 2 or, we have a spike or something like that. As it stands today, July 1st, when we're meeting for small group time on the campus, we should be fine to not do temp checks. No mask, probably, unless you choose to. Some of those we're going to try to create as low touch as possible. So we probably won't have 9 square in the air or some of those kinds of games. But yeah.
Kristen asked about kids check-in and doing temp checks there.
Yes.
Like, how many volunteers did you have doing temp checks? I know the scale is hard to match, but maybe how many people were doing temperature checks versus how many people were actually helping check in a family? Because you
Yeah.
said that volunteers actually check each family in, right?
Right. So at our two largest services, we had 5 people standing there. So one of the staff members was standing there, and then I'm staff, but on the weekends I'm just just a volunteer. And so there were 4 of us leaders who were there. 2 of us were doing temp checks. 2 were at the computer doing the touch, and then the staff member was off to the side to either escort new families down the hallways or to have that one-off conversation had we had a kid with a temp over 100.4. So we had 5. At our smaller services, we might have had 1 person doing temp checks, and it was totally manageable. Like 8:30 on Sunday mornings for us is going to be pretty small. And again, with kind of the trickle in that we experienced, 1 person with the thermometer was sufficient. And then there was, 1 person at the computer and then the staff. So we went from 5 at the larger services to say 3.
Gotcha. Andrea asked about, was there any way that you all had people connect with kids aside from like the online content? And I know that's different now because you're gathering in person, but for churches that are still not gathering in person, did you do anything specific there?
Yeah. So like our Albany, New York campus probably won't be meeting for another few weeks. So they've been in this, what are we doing in the digital space for a long time. So what we did there was we really didn't have success in our context. We didn't have success with Zoom calls with small group leaders. There might have been a handful, but across the board, we would say that wasn't hugely successful for us. So what we did was, if you're a small group leader and you happen to have already had the phone numbers or contact information for the parents that of the kids that were in your group, then we reach out as frequently and as often as possible. Maybe do some YouVersion Bible reading plans with the parents. Because you're an adult, they're an adult, you're all in this thing together. You're at home with your kids too, or, whatever. And then in some cases, we did some lowball kind of things first to kind of feel a family out. So I might shoot a video and say, hey, Liam, it's Miss Allie. I can't wait to see you. Whenever that is, I hope you're having fun with your brothers and sisters or whatever. And I would send that to mom or dad. And then hopefully they would show it to Liam. And then I would get a message back. I did a few of those for some of the kids that I served with on the weekend in the 2-year-old room. And their parents were all 100% responsive. Just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. And they'd send me back a video of Liam or Asher or whoever. Then in some cases, once we needed to figure out with legal about sharing contact information, like, can you share contact information? So what our kids pastors did was in a parent email said, hey, your kids' small group leaders are chomping at the bit to connect with your family and would love to know if we could share your phone number with your child's, classroom leaders. So not necessarily, we didn't dial it all the way down to a small group leader because in some cases there might be 4 or 5 and who knows who would call. So where we got permission, we did do that. And then leaders could then contact the parent and, just say, hey, just wanted to check in on you guys. We really miss,
Yeah, that's smart. That's good. The familiarity is helpful. Like, cause even, you're gathering now, you've had kids ministry, but if you haven't yet, making those connections to me is like an investment for when you are trying to rebuild the church, as you said earlier.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we want to wrap up because it's been almost an hour. We need to talk about how to get people the resources. And so what I'm thinking we can do is, Allie, maybe we can stick around right after we stop this and we'll get a link together, and everybody, you can look for a separate post in the Facebook group. And we'll link to all the resources that Allie mentioned, which you do want to check out. I saw them for 3 minutes before we started, and they look great. I haven't read through them all, but they look great. They look really well put together. And you even had a sample email of what you sent to families, right? So I know people are going to totally swipe that and edit it as they.
I know I am. I'm stealing all those resources.
Of course. So it's what we're all about. So Allie, thanks so much for just giving your time. You're kind of like paving the way. You're the test dummy guinea pig of our children's ministry because you're going first. And you all do things so well that you think through so much ahead of time. I just love it. I love learning from you. So thanks for doing that. Will, thanks for being a part of it too.
I would love for anybody to hit me up on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, or shoot me an email, Allison, 2 L's and a Y at Life.Church. I'm happy to connect with anybody. It's my favorite thing to do is to serve other church leaders. So it would be great.
Well, I am so thankful for Allie Evans. I'll tell you what, she's the NextGen pastor at the largest church in America, and yet freely gives her time to help us with things like this and conversations and to learn. And she's so humble. She wants to learn from so many people. She's willing to share about their mistakes. And let's face it, Life.Church does a million things really, really well. And so I always appreciate learning from her. She is literally one of the best leaders I have the honor of knowing. So I hope you were helped by that interview and that episode. Again, you can get all the links and notes and things like that at nickblevins.com/episode 197. You'll want to make sure you get in the Ministry Boost Facebook group where you could watch the video replay, but get some of those other links we were talking about. If you want to watch the first conversation with Allie, that is in that group as well. So be sure to check that out. And we'll get back to kind of our regular rhythm next week, but wanted to interrupt this week and kind of give you a replay of that conversation. I would love to hear from you. It's been a long time since I've mentioned this, and we've had a lot of guests where we've talked about COVID-19 and what does that mean, and or maybe it's half been about that and half been about something else. I would love to hear from you. What would you like to hear about on the podcast? And usually, and maybe that'll be your answer, it's something very specific that really has nothing to do with COVID-19. It's about church ministry, and that's great. So I'd love to hear about that. If it is something specific to gathering in person again or online ministry or whatever that is, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at nick@nickblevins.com and give me any topic suggestions you have or guest suggestions. If there's somebody that you would love to hear from, I'd love to know that. So email me and give me your thoughts. I'd love to hear that. Thanks for listening. I hope this has been helpful, and I'll catch you next time on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.